Hi, everybody.
Hey!
Hey, look at that. We're live. We're not dead.
I think we
Or
already
are we?
went
Hey, what? Are we live or dead?
somewhere in between.
Well, dead or alive, you're coming with me.
So,
You horn dog.
this week, Elvis had to be out. He's out of town with his wife, having a good getaway, which he deserves after all the shit he deals with. So, since we're so close to the end of Dragon Heist, we did not want to continue and potentially end things without the mighty Yar. So we have we're putting it on hold this week to explore some Numenara, and the reason for that is that after we finish Dragon Heist, I'm going to do some short adventures in Numenara to just sort of have us explore something other than D&D 5e a little bit. And so we figured now would be a good time to maybe just do some character generation, some session 0, get everybody familiar with the rules on stream, and that way, while everybody here at the table is learning how things work, because I'm the only person who really knows the system that well, anybody who's watching, either live or at a future time, can get kind of crash course in the setting and the system as well. And then if you follow the adventure after Dragon Heist, you'll have an idea of the characters that we're playing and how they came into existence and things like that. So that's where we're at this week. I don't know if there's anything anybody wanted to bring up, stuff to talk about before we get started.
For my own edification, for our viewers, in fact, Dave Matthews is South African.
Oh, is he?
Yes. I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay. All right.
Well,
Because last week there was
there was some debate about the origins of Dave Matthews.
Yeah.
The band is from Virginia,
Right.
but he himself is from South Africa.
Okay.
So we
Good.
were, but he didn't
We
get to
were
play.
all correct.
Yes.
We were all correct.
He didn't get to play last night because of the thunderstorm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sucks to be him.
It does suck to be him.
I was trying to offer him a way out.
Real quick, I'm going to go through some stuff, as I like to do in most of our weeks now. Just shout out to some of the Kickstarters that are going on right now that I find interesting, and other people might as well. Fate of Cthulhu just went up the other day. It is, if the Fate core system, if anybody's familiar with that particular system, it runs on that system. It's sort of a pulp Cthulhu adventure. So it's not like standard Call of Cthulhu, which is more sort of everyone's fucked and doomed and horror style. It's more of an action combat, pulp story.
Beating up cultists.
Yeah, beating up cultists and monsters and stuff like that type story. So a little different. They are doing stretch goals for adventures that tie into various different Cthulhu mythos, old gods such as, or Lovecraft stories such as The Color Out of Space, one directly about Azathoth, one about Yig, and they've got more coming. It seems like it's going to be pretty well put together. It's being done, I'm trying to remember who the group is. I remember seeing it and being like, oh yeah, I like what that guy does. Oh yeah, Evil Hat Productions, who I actually backed one of their first Kickstarters for Blades in the Dark, which is a super cool game. It is another one I kind of want us to test out at some point here at the table.
It's really good.
Blades in the Dark. It's a pseudo-fantasy world where you essentially play as, everybody plays as sort of like a thieves guild or like sort of underground organization. And not only do each player have their own characters, but the organization itself is actually a character. So everybody works together to build a character sheet up for the organization. The organization has roles. Every session you play, everybody picks which role of the organization they're going to be for the night, and it can change from session to session if you want.
Like a board of directors.
Yeah, kind of, and like, well, and different. You get different bonuses or abilities to do different things based on your role in the organization for the session. You have to, as you advance, you can advance your organization itself, and create new access to new stuff, both new abilities as well as new contacts and access to new gear and things like that as your organization advances. The other interesting thing they do in the system is a flashback sequence. So how often have you played D&D, let's say, and especially if you're like a wizard or cleric, and you're like, I have these situational spells, but I never memorize them because they're situational as fuck, right? And then all of a sudden you're thrown in the situation where you needed the spell, but you didn't memorize it, and you're like, if I had some sort of clue that this was going to be needed, we could have been prepared for this, right? Well, the Blaze in the Dark system handles that through flashbacks. If the DM puts you in a situation where you're like, oh man, my character totally would have brought a crowbar to open this door, and the GM says, would you have? Okay, flashback scene, explain to me what happened, why would you have thought to bring a crowbar, let's roleplay this out, and if it goes well, then you flash forward to the scene and you have the crowbar. So it allows the DM to throw curveballs at the players, or the players having to be able to anticipate every possible scenario.
Right.
And I kind of dig that. I think that's fun.
That's fair.
But anyway, so it's the same company who did that, and they're doing this Cthulhu game, and I dig it. I don't know that I'm going to be able to back it because money. I already mentioned it last week, but I'll mention it again. There's 9 more days on the Rifts for Savage Worlds American Armageddon Kickstarter. I'm a huge fan of the Rifts setting, though I wasn't a big fan of the old Rifts system. But I do like Savage Worlds. And the new Rifts for Savage Worlds Kickstarter updates the Rifts for Savage Worlds to the new edition of Savage Worlds. And you can not only get access to reprints of the already existing Rifts for Savage Worlds books now updated for the new edition of Savage Worlds, but the books that the Kickstarter itself are for are already pre-updated. So that's super cool. Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, I also brought up last week, 5th edition adventure, being done by a couple of guys who were some of the head writers for BioWare, did Knights of the Old Republic, Baldur's Gate 2, the stories and stuff like that. Have stepped out of video games to open this company, and this is their first big adventure release. I'm super excited for it. It's a blend of sort of Greek mythology and traditional fantasy. There's tons of stretch goals already unlocked, new races, new class options, things like that. And I'm excited for that. But another interesting thing has come of it. It's been so successful and so talked about that one of the guys, I forget his name, which one it was, but one of the individuals who helped write this and started the company just got hired by Wizards of the Coast this week. Because of the fact that this company and this book that they're doing has been so highly anticipated. Wizards of the Coast just hired him to start a brand new branch of Wizards of the Coast in Austin, Texas, to develop a brand new IP, supposedly for both digital and, I believe, print. So, video game and book print storylines. So I think that's pretty cool. I don't know if that means he's stepping away from the company he literally just founded to do this and leaving it to the other guy, or if he's going to manage... Huh?
I hope not.
Yeah. But I thought it was interesting that he got picked up by Wizards of the Coast. The Ultimate Bestiary Dreaded Accursed, which is sort of your one-stop shop for all things creepy and undead and lycanthropic and everything else, is on Kickstarter for 5 more days. Something, I think they're up to like 150, 160 some monsters in the book with fully fleshed out artwork, multiple CRs of each type, layers, and how they organize and everything else. It's going to be a pretty awesome book. And that's the only ones I've really been sort of keeping an eye on myself.
So, ones I'm looking at, but haven't picked up. The Exodus of Wolfbane. That's it's an epic. It says it's an epic 0 to 2nd level
Love you some wolves.
RPG module.
He's pagan. What do you want?
It doesn't say.
0 to 2nd level? That's a short campaign.
Yeah, this is Exodus of Wolfbane Epic 0 to 2nd level adventure compatible with the Dungeon Crawl Classics role playing game.
Oh, the DCC system. Yeah.
Yeah, 56 pages. Blah blah. Check it out. The other one that looks interesting. This is more board game wise. They're making a Bloodborne board game.
I saw that. Yeah.
I absolutely love video game. It's like that up and down, sideways, everything you think of. Discovered everything. But it's Cool Mini or Not is actually part of the project, so you know the miniatures are going to be fucking fantastic.
Yeah, Cool Mini makes some really great miniature games. That's cool. So yeah.
That's all I really got. I don't really.
Anybody else have?
I've seen other things. I've got the Odyssey one saved as well.
I'm
still watching it.
I've backed it. I'm gonna be getting it. So.
Oh, the other thing is, if you like, Ben backed it. I think the late pledge is still open. It's like a 16-bit Super Nintendo kind of age game, but what caught his attention was there's mechs involved. But it's like a medieval style fantasy, but there's a splash of futuristic stuff like mechs in it, and airships and all kinds of stuff.
A video game?
Yeah, it's a video game. It's gonna be like a multi-platform Kickstarter game. There's another one that was interesting to me called Hunt the Night, which is a 16-bit like dark fantasy action adventure. That one's still going on. That one's got 7 days to go. The one that Ben's talking about, or the one that Ben backed, is called Chained Echoes. That's the one. I saved it, but I didn't back it.
Yeah, I tend to go just through Kickstarter and I just save things to keep an eye on stuff.
Yeah, like following things. Like I like to follow things.
Because I'm like, I can't back all the things I want. I just don't have the money, but I like to just keep up with how they're doing and
Pretty much, yeah.
stuff like that.
And of course, keep an eye on release dates.
Yeah. And then maybe like later, once they're actually like out, I might have money to be able to pick them up at a later time. And that way, I can have a list of stuff I can go look for. But, cool. All right. So Ben's not in here, but
Looking at this one really quick while you were talking, I think the right is the way I might go.
based on what you were saying on Facebook, I think that's.
I just read the basic thing of it. I was like, oh, this is right up my alley.
Woo. Jeez, Beej.
My aura of clumsy engages, and it's against my will.
My wife is.
So, without further ado, we'll move into talking about Numenara. So, I was going over some of the basic ideas before we started, but I'll go over again here on stream. Numenara is a science fantasy game that is more fantasy than science, unlike, say, something like Star Wars, which is more science than fantasy. More science fiction, because it's not real science, yeah. But you can't drop bombs in space.
That is true.
So,
and they have to be like 10 feet over the thing too. So
yeah.
otherwise it wouldn't work. I couldn't have fired it from the
We digress.
yeah.
Yeah, let's not go into that.
So the idea is that we are living on Earth millions of years into the future in what is called the Ninth World. Basically, life has risen from nothingness into advanced life forms, civilizations that spanned the globes, only to collapse under their own weight, or maybe interstellar wars, or left the planet, or whatever else.
Some mass extinction.
Yeah, some event, and then the Earth reset, and it happened all over again, and this has now happened 9 times. So beneath everywhere you walk, essentially there are ruins of ancient civilizations that used magic or technology, or maybe even technology that is so advanced you think it's magic. This current civilization is fairly feudalistic in terms of how it's set up and its advancement. The existence of ancient technologies and things like that, though, and scavenging for stuff, these civilizations do sometimes still have interesting amenities or sci-fi bends to them. Though often the technology that is used is not fully understood. It might be partially understood by a handful of people that work on it and maintain it, but it's largely just sort of like a, this is fucking cool. Or, small things, like you might have electricity in parts of a town, but maybe not other parts because, their generators aren't strong enough to get the electricity all the way across town type stuff. Or, you might have a building that, or you might have street lamps, right? You have electric street lamps that run down the road, but indoors maybe most people still use candlelight. So there's like a blend of sort of everything. The world is mostly human, but there are alien life forms that have come to Earth and visit. Well, some of them are just visiting. Some of them have sort of set up residence and live amongst humans. There are what are called abhumans, which are sort of like humanoid creatures that mostly hate humanity now and want to destroy it. There are mutants that, and stuff like that are out there. There's, of course, different kingdoms or lands that sometimes war with other nations, just like one would expect. There's forests full of monsters and creatures, just like a D&D setting. There's mysteries of all kinds, floating obelisks scattered the lands that people don't understand what the fuck they're there for or what they do. And you feel better? Are you lighter now?
Heavier, weirdly enough.
That is strange.
And it is getting larger.
I am.
And so the game considers that by default most people are going to be human. You don't have to be. There are rules of how to not be. And we can talk about those in a bit. And yeah, I mean that's general setting overview that Ben missed. Pretty much all of it.
Sucks to be you.
But we'll get into character creation, and I think going through character creation will allow us. Well, actually, before we get into character creation, I'm going to go over basic system stuff. I think that will help as we go into character creation, so you understand some of the things that might be mentioned. 90% of all dice rolls that you're going to make are a D20, and the Numenara is designed around some key concepts to speed up the flow of the game. One, players make all dice rolls. DM never needs to roll a die. However, players should never need to do math. The DM does the math. So, the way this works is that, since we've played a lot of D&D here on the stream, anybody who's watched is at least, I think at this point, semi-familiar with D&D, and obviously everybody at this table is familiar. An attack roll in D&D, you have, you roll a D20 and then you might add some number to it based on stats and level and a bunch of other stuff, right? And then you're going to compare that to some number, an armor class or something like that. That's not how this works. The DM is going to set a difficulty of the action that you want to take. Tasks are difficulty 0 through 10. 0 being you don't need to roll. And then the target number to beat a challenge rating or a challenge of a difficulty of a given number is 3 times the difficulty number. So difficulty 1, you have to get a 3 or better on a d20 roll to beat. Pretty easy. But at least there is some marginal possibility of failure, so a die roll is still needed. Obviously, a difficulty of 10 is a DC of 30 on a d20 roll. You're not going to be able to do it. There are ways of getting around it. And so,
2 d20s.
difficulties should be static. The DM should decide, if something is difficult at level, in the game they're called tiers. Level 1 is a difficulty 4. Then even when you're tier 6, which is one of the higher tiers in the game, it should still be a difficulty 4, right? The difficulty of something should not scale to create, artificially, as players grow in power, right? That's silly and doesn't make sense.
Right.
Instead, things that once were pseudo-difficult in terms of a die roll at lower levels should simply feel easier because your power has increased. So even though the difficulty standard is the same, you have ways of easing that difficulty, right? Because of your skill or whatever else. So in that way, I'm never going to tell you what the difficulty of something is. I'll just be like, okay, this is a difficulty whatever. This target number will then be 3 times whatever. And I'll just say, give me a roll. And what you're going to do is, since you don't know what the difficulty is, you're going to tell me in what ways you have maybe some advantages of making that act happen. So, you might say, you're attacking a foe, and I say, alright, he needs to get based on this foe's level, he needs to get a whatever. And you might say, well, hey, because so-and-so just, is flanking them, or whatever, I maneuver, we're maneuvering in such a way to distract him, and he doesn't know which, way the attack's coming from, or whatever else, and so I'm going to make a strike when he's not looking at me, or something to that effect. And I would say, okay, well then I'm going to modify the difficulty down 1, and now you need to get over this number.
A number that would be 3 less.
Would be 3 less than previously, right? And so the idea is that you describe to me what you're doing with enough detail and enough sort of flair, or whatever, or thinking strategically, or whatever else, that you might be able to ease the difficulty of the task down some. And as you gain in power, you'll get abilities that will allow you to say, all right, if you're making a roll doing this type of stuff, reduce the let the DM know that this power allows you to reduce the difficulty of that by whatever.
Right.
So, in that way, I never tell you what the difficulty is. You're never going to know. You're just going to know pass or fail, and all you have to do is roll the d20 and just tell me what the number is. I do all the math, and that should speed up stuff because each individual person at the table isn't trying to add up a bunch of numbers.
There are modifications to your own d20 though, correct?
Typically, no.
So the modifications apply to the difficulty rating.
Right.
So conversely, if you're attacking us and the person is shitty, you would just set the difficulty for them high, and then I would use whatever defensive abilities.
I never roll dice. So
So
when someone's attacking you, you're rolling a defense roll.
Right, so you would make the difficulty low to dodge the attack, and then I would use
Correct.
whatever defensive abilities I have to lower it even more.
You may even be able to
Multiply
lower it
that
to a
by
0 and just be like, this dude cannot hit me.
Right.
If he's
Okay.
particularly, if the difference in power is significant,
Right.
you may just be like, he can't. But then maybe I would take that into consideration the next round and either go attack somebody else or say, all right, he notices what you're doing.
That won't apply anymore.
So he's going to take these steps to sort of circumvent that particular maneuver that you just used.
Right.
You know, whatever. So the idea is that we describe actions, whether in combat or out of combat, with enough detail and placing ourselves in the moment enough that we can properly assess an appropriate difficulty to the action. There's only 3 stats, unlike D&D where there's 6. There is might, speed, and intellect. Your might, you can kind of think of as a combination of your strength and constitution in D&D. It's your physical hardiness. Your speed is kind of I guess would be your dexterity and to some extent your wisdom. Because it could apply to how quickly you think, not just how quickly you act. And your intellect doesn't really have much to do with charisma, but again, like your intelligence, maybe a little bit of charisma from D&D or whatever. Maybe a little, the other half of wisdom, whatever. All characters will generally try to focus into one of those 3 things. You're not going to be required to by any means. But it's how most people do things just for the ease of play. You will have a pool number that might be like starting pool. If you're a might heavy character, your starting pool of might be something like 22, right? And you might have, say, 22 might, 11 speed, and like 8 intelligence. If you're like super might heavy. And that pool is not really a rating, unlike where D&D, like if I have an 18 strength, I'm stronger than somebody with a 12 strength. That's not necessarily true in Numenara. Like if you have a might pool of 22, you're not necessarily stronger than somebody with a might pool of 9.
At the start of the day, maybe.
At the start of the day. But the thing is, that person with a might pool of 22 can do more shit throughout the day without tiring than that person with a might of 9. So that becomes relevant.
I saw under armor that like heavy armor reduces your might by the hour.
So that's the one thing. These cheat sheets are actually for the old edition of Numenara. Mm-hmm. The armor thing is one of the key things that changed in this edition. That's not true anymore.
Okay.
So
that's what I was like.
Don't worry about that, because a lot of people were like, in the old edition, were like, just don't play heavy armor characters because that's bullshit. Yeah, that's not a thing anymore. Now, essentially, all medium and heavy armor does now is reduces your speed pool while wearing it. So your maximum speed is reduced by a amount based on if it's medium or heavy for the day. It can have other impacts if you're doing like, grueling. If you're doing a long march, through a desert or some shit, then the fact that you're wearing heavy armor may have some other negative impacts for you. But like, I might make difficulties for certain types of checks higher as you become exhausted quicker or whatever else. But yeah, the drain on might per hour was ridiculous. So other than pools, you have an edge for each of your 3 stats. You have might edge, speed edge, and intelligence edge, or intellect edge. And your edge value is a value you subtract from the cost of all powers that you activate from that pool. So any power you get will typically say either it's just passive and free and it just kind of is all the time, or costs X number of points, might points, or speed points, or intellect points. If you have an edge in that given stat, then you subtract your edge from the cost. So if you have an edge of 1 and your ability costs 1, it's free. You can do it all day long. Doesn't matter. If you try to activate a power of 3, you subtract 1, now it costs you 2. And that way, using powers drains you. because also anytime you take damage, damage is applied to those same pools based on the type of damage it is. So if you are using your most powerful of abilities all the time and draining your pools, you could maybe get hit once and all of a sudden be, riding the struggle bus.
Shades of Shadowrun.
Yeah. Damage is flat value based on weapon type: light weapon, medium weapons, heavy weapons. A light weapon only does 2 damage whenever you hit it, but is always considered an asset on your attack. An asset means that it eases the difficulty of the attack by 1. So, if you're wielding a light weapon, you're doing more consistent damage, but it's low. But you're more likely to hit because your difficulty for hitting is always 1 lower than if you're wielding a different type of weapon. And then it's 4 damage for a medium weapon, 6 damage for a heavy weapon. Pretty standard. Now, that can go up because if you roll a 17 or higher on the die when making an attack, you do more damage. If you roll a 17, you did 1 more damage. If you did 18, you did 2 more damage. If you roll a 19, you do 3 more damage, or you get a minor boon, essentially. And there will be lists of what that means. I think there's even some in here. Or if you roll a 20, you do 4 more damage, or you get a major effect or boon. And what that can mean, it can be anything from your enemy is stunned for the round, or it could be depending on. Some of them are based on what your abilities are. Some abilities say, hey, you can now do this as a major effect or a minor effect or whatever else.
Stab him in the butt.
Yeah, to be stabbed. It might be that you get to like a major effect for some skill. Like you have if you're a healer type thing, you might have a major effect. It's when you roll a 20, you get to recover 3 points in any pool you want, right, or some shit like that. And you're like, fucking hell, yeah, cool. So it's kind of nice because we're used to in D&D, you gotta roll a 20 for anything super awesome to happen. You've got a little bit, it's more analog, right? It's not just, did you do something awesome, did you not do something awesome? There's now degrees of awesome. And that's good. And distance is just done in immediate range, which is essentially I can get to you right now. You're a few feet, maybe at most, I think 15 feet away from me. I mean, I can just hop and skip right over you. Short range, which is anything out to about 50 feet. Typically, if you want to move a short distance, that's your turn, moving a short distance. And then, unless and then long range is out to 100 some feet. And then anything beyond that is generally considered very long and probably not relevant to what's happening. And that way we don't have to keep track of I can only move 30 feet this round and the guy's 35 feet away from me. Fuck, I can just say, it's he's immediate distance from you, can get to him, you're fine. Or he's short distance from you, so you can get to him, but you probably can't attack him this round. Or he's long distance. If you want to get to him, you better start trucking. Let's see, other important things to go over. Effort. So you can always take effort. You have a maximum amount of effort you can do based on your tier or level. At first, you can only, I believe, do 1 degree of effort at the beginning of the game. But what effort is just sort of a free reduction of difficulty. Before you make a roll, you say, I'm going to use effort. At which point, based on the type of action you're doing, you have to spend 3 from the pool to apply 1 level of effort. That is reduced by your edge, if you have any for that pool. And then 1 level of effort reduces it by 1 step. As you go on, you might have you might be able to spend up to 2 points of effort, at which point you spend 3 for the first, and then 2 more points from the given pool per additional level of effort. So it's 3 and then 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. Edge is reduced from the total value, not each level of effort. So that's again one way that you can, when you're like, I really need to make something happen, then you're like, I'm using effort. I gotta get this down at least 1 or however much. You can essentially use as much effort as you have effort rank, which is generally equal to your tier. Assets, which are things like just objects or stuff like that might ease the ability to do something. So like a crowbar might be an asset in opening a door, right? Reduces the difficulty of opening the door by 1. You can only ever use 2 assets to ease something, so assets can only ever ease the difficulty of something by up to 2. But effort can go up to however much your effort rank is. Also, it's another reason why edge is really powerful, because if you can get your edge high enough, you can start just doing effort for free. That's the general sense of stuff. There's probably stuff that we'll have questions about as we actually go through character creation, and that's fine. We will address those as they come up. But that's kind of the core of things, is you roll a d20 against the difficulty. If you think that you should be able to make it easier, either through situational assets, effort, whatever else, then you let me know before the roll is made. I adjust the difficulty as appropriate, and then we make the roll. Actually, one last thing. Ciphers. Ciphers are a core part of the game. They are one-use magical items, essentially. You can only your class, your type, will dictate what your maximum number of ciphers you can hold is. If you pick up any additional ones, then they start breaking and not working. Essentially, there's like interference or whatever.
Okay, Bluetooth.
Yeah. The idea is that everyone should have typically people should always kind of have on them when you sort of start an adventure or start going off to do something cool. You should probably be at your max number of ciphers. The idea being that, and you should probably find some as the adventure goes on. The idea being that people should always kind of, the world is full of these ruins of crazy old shit, and you should be able to find crazy old shit that does cool stuff, and you use them, and then it kind of gets destroyed or runs out of energy or whatever else.
5-hour energy bomb.
Yeah, it might be, that way it makes the sort of discovery and the exploration of the world around you beneficial to the characters. And these could be things like healing potions, or it might be a walkie-talkie that only has enough battery juice to work once, or you might not realize that's what it is, but it's a two-way communication device, or it's a ray gun that again only has enough juice for a single shot.
Why do you? We haven't lived in that house for years. Why do you have glitter?
I don't know.
Okay.
Wife and kids, man.
There's that too.
Whatever happens.
So yeah, ciphers are a key component of the game as well. So we're gonna get into character creation now, and the way we make characters in Numenara, and the cipher system as a whole, is answering or filling out the blanks in the sentence. I am a adjective, noun, that verbs. However, we don't use adjective, noun, and verb. We use descriptor, type, and focus. Descriptors typically are a description of sort of your personality or general demeanor. Not always, but most of the time. They typically give you a lot of background where your character came from, some bonus skills, some adjustments to your 3 pools, or at least one of your pools, a connection to somebody else in the story, and things like that. It's a lot of background stuff, and your descriptor actually can change throughout the game. You'll lose what you had, but there's actually mechanics in the game for spending time in the game, because people change, right? If you're like, this isn't really working for me, I want my character to advance, show growth or whatever, and I want this descriptor to go away and a new descriptor to apply, then you can work on that in the game. Your type is what is most closely resembles a class in D&D. There are 6 core ones to the new Numenara Discovery and Destiny books, but there are some from some of the older books that I will allow. They're just different enough that I think they work. And a type is not... A type is a foundation. It is not... I would not consider it the core of your power. I would not consider it, the most defining element of your character. But it is the thing that kind of gives you the underlying basic skill set for your character that other things can then build upon. So if you're a glaive, for instance, they're sort of like the in-your-face melee, armored, combat-y type peoples. That could be a whole host of types of characters. You could be a gladiator, hell, you could be a rogue, you could be a paladin, you could be a whatever else. You can have all these sorts of different sort of power sets to go along with being a heavily armored, in-your-face combat monster. But it's really just the base kit. It's saying, all right, you have access to a couple of different types of armor depending on how you want to make your character. You're good with weapons, and here's a few basic stuff. Also, your starting default pools are assigned by your type. Your focus, to me, is your most defining element. It's the thing that says, yeah, cool, I might be a glaive, but there's lots of glaives out there. This is the thing that makes me me. It might be like, walks in shadow, or like travels through time, or
Stabs buttholes.
These are the types of things that make your character unique and will give you the most unique and defining elements of your character. For instance, like, I know you talked about wanting to be sort of like a tinkerer, crafter type person that maybe has like a robot pet or like a turrety type thing. And so a right works, but a right isn't going to give you, I don't believe, from what I remember in the stuff, it's not going to give you some, like, an automata or a turret or anything like that you can use. That's not a thing for a right. A right will craft stuff, but that's not a thing. So you would need to find a focus that says that you have access to some sort of follower or whatever else. And then even if there's something like, it might be like hunts with beasts or something like that, but we could flavor it to be like, alright, you don't get a beast, you get a
Hunts with robots.
yeah. So that's where, like, if there's a defining element, something like, I have a little robot buddy that follows me around, like, that is going to be where your focus comes into play, not your type.
System for archaeological discoveries.
Good word language. You speak good.
Um,
Mouth verbs.
It's this word that interferes sometimes with my speech.
You can shave your mustache.
Not the mustache, dude.
So there are types. There are a few in number. Like I said, there's 6 core ones to the game in these books. I have access to some others that we'll talk about. I think there's probably not more than about 8 or 9. For descriptors and foci, if you looked at the thread I posted on Facebook the other week, there are dozens of each. So that we do not have to go through each individual one here on stream, That's why I said try to have a general idea of what you want to do. I can then help you narrow down what things might fit that character idea. If I need to just read a list, I will read a list for people who need that, but I will not get into the details of each of those items in the list until you tell me one that sounds fucking cool, and then I will give you some details about it.
That sounds suspicious. They're like, please don't make me read the whole thing.
Yeah, I will be here for a long time if I have to go through all, because they're scattered throughout numerous books, some of which I don't have here physically. I'll have to pull up PDFs on my phone to read shit to you. So I don't want to have to do all that for viewers. So first, before we get into all that, I'll go around the table. Tell me I got no clue if you got no clue. But if you have an idea of what you want to play, tell me. Just give me you don't have to use the descriptor type and focus stuff. Just give me like a core concept. Like, I want to be a spellcaster that, shoots fucking lasers from my eyes or some shit. Like, I don't know. Tell me, whatever. Tell me a core idea, and then, once we've gone around the table, we'll be able to start talking about narrowing in all that stuff, and we'll talk about specifics.
And like I said, what I posted was I wanted to be an obsessive Milax seeker who figures things out. I don't actually want to be a Milax with the traits. I just want to look like a Milax.
Okay, so now you're talking about races. So we can get into that if we want to get into that right now. So,
well, using your shortcut thing, I was. So
right.
You said,
so
I am a blank who does something.
Right. So, races, like I said, the game defaults to you being human. You can be other things, there are other races. And there are a couple of ways of handling races. In the books, they recommend that what you do is, if you want to be a particular race, or even human, but from a particular region that might give you some cultural things, that you replace your descriptor with the race or region that you're from. So instead of being like you said, an obsessed, whatever.
Obsessive Milax seeker.
Yeah. Well,
it would just be obsessive Milax.
Right. So in your case, you would either, if we use this rule, instead of you'd either be an obsessed seeker or a Milax seeker. You couldn't do both, right? Because you only have one descriptor.
Okay.
And then the Mylok listing for that alien race will give, all right, if you're a Mylok, then this is all the things that you get. And we can go that route. And I'm willing to open this up to using any of these mechanics. If you want to really focus on my race as a core element of my character, then using it as your descriptor is really good for doing that. Or you can always just say, I want to be a Mylok because I like the way it looks and kind of like the roleplay element of it, but I don't really give a flying fuck about any of the powers that might come with being that thing. Then you just say, cool, in your case, I'm an obsessed seeker who, whatever the other thing was.
Yeah.
And we'll just say you're a Mylok and you look like a fucking Mylok, you just don't get any fucking changes to your powers. It doesn't matter, it's cosmetic. Cool, you're a different race. Fuck it. Right? Or you can kind of go in the middle, and then an optional rule for the cipher system is things called flavors. A flavor might be something like the stealth flavor, right? Where you're like, oh man, I want to be a glaive, but I want to be like a stealthy glaive. And there's not a lot of stealthy abilities under the glaive type, right? Like, okay, so there's a list of stuff under the stealth flavor, of cool stealthy abilities, and what we would do is we'd say, alright, well, if you're going to be a stealthy glaive, it doesn't make sense for you to have, say, heavy armor training, right? So, you no longer have access to heavy armor training, because you're stealth flavored glaive. But this stealth power from the stealth flavor is now substituted in for it, right? So you still have access to some of your glaive stuff, but not all of them, and the ones you don't have access to, your flavor abilities have been rolled in to fill in those gaps. You can do that with races as well, and say, well, I want to have access to some of my cool alien race stuff, but maybe not all of it. Then I would say, okay, we'll flavor your type with your race. So you won't have access to these things, but now you have access to these things. And in that way, you kind of get a little bit of the best of both worlds. I don't care which of those systems you want to do. If you want to be a particular race or alien or whatever else, I'm fine with all three of those systems. Either it not changing your character at all, we just fucking say you're that thing. Use your race or geographical region as your descriptor, or we use a flavor and we sort of customize your type by substituting stuff. Fine with all of those. So we'll go around. Ben, what's your? You don't have to complete the sentence. You don't have to be like, I'm a bloody blah 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 blah. What's the idea for your character that you want to play?
I've got a few, so give me a couple minutes
Okay.
to figure out what's
Glenn, it's cool you got your sentence, but just to make sure that sentence works for what you want to do, what do you have in mind?
I mean, I really don't know what the stats are for the Mylox other than the description. But I kind of just want, like I said, I'd like to roleplay as one, but I don't really. I'd like to use the stats of the Seeker, or the
Sure,
abilities of the Seeker.
Okay, that's great. But the idea is, in your head, what do you do? What's your role in the group? What type of character are you? I don't mean type as in terms of Seeker. I mean type of like, are you
I like to tinker with things. I like to fix things. I like to, learn the history of something. If I find something, this does something, but why did they make it this way? And everything. That's what I thought the Seeker more appealed to me.
Okay.
Like it wasn't just about finding something. It's about finding out why did they make this. Did they not just want to walk up and touch things?
Sure. Okay.
And as far as fighting
you
abilities, I
wanna-
don't know about fighting abilities, but I'm like, that's kind of where I'm thinking.
Right.
Because this world, you're like an architect. You're Indiana Jones kind of thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of.
Anthropologist.
Yeah. There is anthropologist, not architect. Although you can be architect as well. There is the other thing. This game is not only sort of science fantasy, sort of D&D, go out and adventure and like delve into ruins and collect. There is city building, crafting, for parts to then create blueprints for crafting things. And that might be items that you carry. That also could be things like, base defenses and things like that. So the idea is that we will be starting in a relatively small type of town and working to better that town and advance it and grow it, make it more safe and things like that. So characters that aren't just combat great but are good at being able to craft stuff or find things that can be brought back to advance your home are relevant to the overall progression of the party and the story and everything else. So you're more interested in playing a character who's just fascinated with ancient civilizations,
right,
and wants to bring back things that you find out in the world,
sure,
and find out how they work, how you can apply them to today's existence.
yes.
Okay. BJ, what are your thoughts?
Yay, fun. So I have a split mind. So,
I think that is a thing you can actually have in the game.
okay, well. Because I was thinking that I wanted to do something with a character that, in this world, there are creatures that get trained to do a job, or are bred, or you create new creatures to do things. Like, I want to create a dragon.
Okay. So you want to
Like little ones that can attack.
you basically want to be like a geneticist that
Yeah,
introduces new species into the world.
Yep.
You want potbelly dragons.
What we find from the previous
Sure.
worlds.
Sure.
So like a little bit of those flavors of looking for things,
Ancient
but totally
dragons
like
from the first world.
we're making something new. I don't care if it kills everyone as long as I live and make another one.
But so you're less interested in sort of like the technology and more of a blend of like of maybe a little bit of magic with the fauna of not only the current world, but maybe fossils or genetic leftovers of old civilization.
But also
things like that.
finding.
Jeff Goldblum's Nemesis.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking also because typically people that kind of go that route also.
You want to make Jurassic Park.
Yes, the whole 9 yards. The
Yeah.
plants, the animals,
Right.
Everything. And then I want them to have cool jobs to do. I don't want everyone to be like, like walk up to the city, you see a big dragon. Never mind, we're leaving now. Like,
Not the mama. Not the mama.
All right.
Joker germs.
Okay.
Like for the greater good, but totally
Sure.
crazy.
Sure. Okay.
Sure, the greater good.
Greater good.
So, are you still?
Shuck
You're,
it.
Grantha, you're still interested in sort of like the sort of tinkerer.
Yeah, if he's more like discovering it, like
Yeah.
I mean I want to delve runes too, but like I'm also inventor.
Yeah.
And make stuff. And I guess it just popped in my head just now. I was figuring out to benefit whatever society I belong to or whatever. I was thinking like I'm a doctor of some sort who actually specializes in creating artificial like limbs and organs for people.
Those are things that can exist in this world. So yeah. All right.
Yeah, so like someone needs a new heart, and it's going to help that person. It's not a transplant, but an actual mechanical heart. You're going to make it, put it in your body, and it's
That's
going to
cool.
work.
I dig that.
And then of course I need some kind of like autonomous, or maybe a homunculus like helper that follows me
It's
around.
your nurse essentially.
Yeah,
Right?
that follows me around.
Cool. All right.
His BB-8.
It's your
Bite.
your Igor / BB-8 to your Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah, which is hot.
A hot robot. Okay.
What color are Iggy?
Yes, I
Nick.
call it my Hobot
What's that,
for
Cherry
my
3000?
sex box 369.
What's it, Cherry
Either an
3000?
obsessive or a relentless nano. And then I had a number of things to choose from.
Well, okay? Without worrying about the sentence and those
Right.
bits, like what's just the general idea of?
Well, the general
The
idea of the character is a fortune teller, I guess. Which is difficult to do in a game because nobody really knows the future, even the game masters. But,
Well, yeah. I mean, I might.
He's getting
You can
new
work with
visions.
it,
You
yeah.
won't know that if they're
He's
real
the
or not.
Oracle.
So I was thinking, Awakens Dreams would be a good one. Builds Tomorrow. And I was thinking of Horror Spices, that would be like Consorts with the Dead.
Yeah. That's a little bit more necromantic.
Right.
In
The concept, they're somewhere in between there.
Okay.
He's not raising the dead, he's talking to him, right?
Well, the abilities in that there's
Oh.
some raising of the dead.
Yeah. So Horror Spicy in the real world was basically reading interests. So it wasn't about raising the dead, it was just,
Ooh.
getting your hands messy.
Yeah.
But that's the idea.
Okay. Ben, if you
Well, actually, the character.
got multiple ideas, then throw them all out. I don't care.
Well, the character that I originally had is actually kind of close to what you kind of what you were just talking about.
Dr. Frankenstein?
But it was gonna kind of play on the edge of being into necromancy, but for the not in like an evil sense, but like trying to understand death and how it can be used, knowing. Again, this was through the lens of D&D, where necromancy is normally known as being always fucking used for evil. But knowing that its general application was evil, but trying to utilize it for the potential good that it could possibly have, despite the negative connotations of it. But so that was one idea, and then my favorite character is always the jack of all trades survivor type, who gets his hands into a little bit of everything. Can talk his way out of a situation, but can also fight. Knows
bard.
a little. Yeah, I like the bard-esque class that can do a little bit of everything. And
Isn't there a Jack in this?
There is a Jack, and Jack for that idea would work. Also, the Arcus could potentially work.
I didn't
there.
read that. I didn't read
The
that.
Arcus is a sort of social character
Oh
who-
yeah, I did a little bit.
who they kind of bolster everyone around them, including towns. When an Arcus goes into a town, the rating for the town, for certain aspects of that town, will increase by 1. So that you have access to more things just because you're an Arcus in the town. Also it wasn't the Seeker. There's another one that I
Delve?
listed there. No.
Oh.
The Delve is the one that wants to go into ruins and sort of scavenge everything and bring back
The cool stuff.
the cool stuff. Yeah. Usually to sort of like tear shit apart so that Wrights can then craft stuff.
Jack? You have
No, there's another one that's sort of again sort of the charismatic character. They're more the Han Solo type character. They instead of being like sort of the Barty like bolster everybody, they're the charismatic sort of like sly character that kind of has the ins with the secret organizations and can kind of manipulate people into doing whatever they
What
want.
is that again?
I forget the name of it now. It's in the on the
It's not
Facebook.
Orcus.
No, it's not Arcus. It's not going to be in that book. It's in one, it's from one of the players. The players guide. But so I mean, there are some options.
Well, it sounds like the Archist is more the taking the social aspect to more of an extreme,
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
but lacking in the rest of the things that I would still enjoy.
Yeah, the Arcus isn't that great in combat themselves. They can't do things. They're mostly good, like a bard would be in terms of like, you make everybody else better in combat. You are not going to be the one dishing out a ton of damage or whatever else, but you will be able to sit on the back line and make sure that the people on the front line whoop ass.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, but we can kind of talk about all this. The Jack might be best because if you really do want to be hand pick a bunch of different things from different areas, the Jack has access to stuff from almost every other type.
Now, I didn't in the character in that player's guide. I didn't see a bunch of like actions that were available to choose from. Is that in a different book? Or
What do you
did
mean? What do you mean by actions to choose from?
like the things that would require me to spend points from a pool to actually use.
They should have been listed under either your under the focuses and under the types. So if you looked up Jack, they should add a bunch of stuff that you pick from. But
Yeah, Jack is in there, but
so like for instance, here if I pull up. Here I'm on the nano. Not that it really matters, but like so first tier nano, you know, it gives me some basic stuff, and then I go to
skills
under esoteries, which is what the nano's abilities are. I've got I can pick from hedge magic, which costs one another point.
Okay, so the
Onslaught is one
these
another
tricks of the trade are
Yeah.
my abilities.
Right. Yep.
Gotcha.
All right. So with that stuff out of the way, I'm gonna use my Facebook post to sort of help since I already saw a lot of stuff there.
It's interesting.
Where am I at? All right. So we're gonna because types, like I said, are sort of your foundation. I think it's best to get that out of the way. It'll give you your base pools. It'll give you your starting effort, your starting edges, and things like that, and kind of give you a good, like I said, foundation to decide on how you want to modify that with your descriptor and your focus. So to go over the types that are in the game, you have glaives, as I've sort of mentioned a couple times. They're your warriors of just about any type. It could be a barbarian, a monk, a paladin, gladiator type, you know, swashbuckler, whatever else. If you're in-your-face melee combatant that sort of revels in battle, one way or the other, you are likely to be a glaive. Nanos are sort of like wizards, sorcerers, things like that. They get what are called esoteries, which are spells, although sometimes it could be flavored to be that you have access to crazy technology, you know, gadgets and technology that people just perceive as being magic. Or even might be perceived as being fucking technology. Like, you can have a nano that has, like, fucking shoulder cannons, or whatever else. The visuals of it don't matter, right? So, but the idea is that the things you do, that you have access to, are usually extraordinary. They might, to the average person, even if it's a giant fucking shoulder cannon, that's not a thing I see every day. That's weird. That's beyond my understanding. The nano is supernatural for all intents and purposes to your average everyday person. Um, Jacks have access to things from a lot of different areas, a lot of different other types, as well as having some of their own unique elements. In the new edition, they definitely sort of focused them a little bit more. It used to be they literally only had abilities from the other types. That's all they had. Now they have some unique stuff as well. But if you do want to kind of be the guy who's not the best at anything, but can always fill in for whatever needed, a Jack is a good way to deal about that. An Arcus, like I said, is a person who just has an overwhelmingly a personality who, when you go into a town, everybody responds well to them. You might get things sold to you that they wouldn't sell to anybody else just because people like you. And when you go into combat or whatever else, you have abilities that will bolster your allies or hinder your enemies. You're not usually the one dealing out a lot of damage, but you create efficiency in your group. Rights are crafters and tinkerers, and like I said, builders. They not just craft and tinker tiny little objects. You can craft your own ciphers as a right. That's cool. You can even eventually craft your own artifacts, which are what we would traditionally consider magical items. So instead of one-off use stuff, they're things that stick around for a long time. But they also, they're also good for building up the town itself, building walls and defenses and stuff like that. You're able to create blueprints for items so that, or even take an item that you found and figure out how to craft it so you can make more of them and stuff like that. A right will be heavily invested in crafting materials and the crafting system of the game, which is collecting parts and iotum, and certain types of iotum have unique properties, and figuring out blueprints and how to get X number of each of different types of iotum and combine them into stuff like that. That's what rights do. Delves are all about finding the places that have the best shit to get iotum and parts for crafting. They love going down and finding shit in ruins and bringing it back up, so that they don't give a shit what it used to be. They give a shit about what its potential is after the fact. You find some awesome facility of a previous age that has computer screens all over the place and all this stuff. You don't give a shit about what it does. What you give a shit about is like, holy crap, there's probably a whole lot of scrap in there I can pull out, take back, and we can make some cool ass shit out of it. Whereas the Seeker would be like, no, but this could be awesome as it is. Like, we need to figure out what it does. A Glint is the one I was talking about that's sort of like the Han Solo social character. They're the charismatic guy who manipulates people into doing what they want. Kind of has the inside scoop on the street level. Might have connections to seedy underground organizations and things like that. And then the Seeker, I was just saying, is the one who's like, they go down, they find shit, and they're like, this is amazing, how does it work? I want to know what it does, this is so cool. And they connect with the Numenara, or ancient magics and technologies, to figure out what they were used for and how you can apply those applications in the modern day and things like that. So similar to the Delve, but not the same. Those are your types. If we want more detailed descriptions of any of them, I can go into the books and grab those. If any of them are like, I really think I'm going to do that, but I need to hear more.
Do you know where the Seeker is? Is that it's not in that?
So that's going to be if you go
in. Is it older book or?
It's an older book.
Okay.
If you go to my Google Drive that I linked in the thing, and you go to the player options under the Numenara, you said the Glint. Is that what you're saying? Or the Seeker?
Right.
The Seeker. I believe Seeker is in character. If you go into the player options or player stuff in that folder, and go to the character options 1 book, I believe it's in that one. Let me check.
Okay, I'm looking.
It might be in 2. It's in one of those 2 books. It's either in 1 or 2.
If it ever opens.
But yeah, does anybody need me? You're pretty sure you want to do a nano, right? Do we want to just get into what that means, or do you need me to read any more about it?
No, you just started.
Okay. So if you are sure you want to do a nano, then here's some things to consider first and foremost. Nanos in society. Frequently, common folks fear nanos or look up with them with suspicion. It's easy to be afraid of a brute with an axe, but when it comes to someone who wields invisible powers, magic, or for lack of a better term, too much is unknown. A nano's strange abilities are unsettling even to the bravest souls, unless they have a modicum of knowledge about the Numenara. That said, not everyone's frightened or intimidated by nanos. There are people and creatures that have capabilities far beyond the understanding of normal folks, and things that even nanos might not understand, and things that nanos might fear. So, you don't have to pick any of these, but just ideas for flavor of like what your background, where your power comes from. It could be forbidden knowledge. So you have an understanding of the Numenara far better than most people do. You know it isn't just strange machines buried in old ruins. The Numenara is everywhere. It's the Force, right? Beyond perception of humans, you know that microscopic machines called nanites are threaded in every inch of the world, waiting to be activated. And you know that satellites are in orbit broadcasting information, waiting for people to access it. That's stuff that most people would find fucking absurd, but to you, you're like, that's fucking reality. It could be psionics. All your powers may just originate from your mind. And be a natural talent. Ports and plugs. You have connections with machines for one clear reason. You're practically a machine yourself. Your nervous system is laced circuitry in your body with implanted jacks and ports. Very sort of matrixy, shadow running type stuff. You could go that route. Or if you want to do sort of the Horus Pixie, sort of like old school magic-y type stuff, we can go that route too. The idea is just get an understanding of like where does your power actually originate from, so that you have an idea of sort of how to flavor things, what the advancement of your character is going to be like. And then from there, you have an effort of 1. First your might pool starts at 7, your speed at 9, and your intellect at 12. You then have 6 additional points to divide any way you choose amongst those 3 pools. So go ahead and write down what your starting might, speed, and intellect will be. 7, 9, 12, and then you add 6 however you want. Okay. Alright, so your effort level is 1. You find on your sheet where your effort is 1. You're a genius, so you have an intellect edge of 1, but your might and speed edges are 0. You have expert cipher use, which means you can have up to 3 ciphers at a time.
I'm at 3.
Yep. And you can use light weapons without any penalties, but you have an inability, meaning if you try to use with medium weapons and heavy weapons,
Things get more difficult.
which means it becomes more difficult for you to wield them.
Okay.
So basically, under weapons, you could just write,
Is there weapons, please?
it might be on the back. You do have a back page as well. I know there was
It's
a
equipment.
Or equipment is it. You just list, that you're say proficient with light weapons and inability with medium and heavy weapons. That's another thing for skills. There's no clear-cut list of skills in the game. Basically, anything that you can be knowledgeable or good at can be a skill, because there's not skill ranks. You basically just say, I'm proficient in this, or if you're proficient in it, then you ease the difficulty of things related to that skill by 1. If you are expert in it, you ease the difficulty of things related to it by 2. It's that simple. So if you want, like, if something says, pick a couple of skills, then you can just pick whatever. There's some examples we can go through if you want, but For you, you are trained in understanding Numenara as a skill. So basically,
Notes.
there's no skill section.
Oh, there's skills.
Yeah.
So aside from the abilities that are listed on a character type, what sort of abilities
Your
are
focus will also give you access to some as well.
okay? Okay, I'm gonna need a little more than that too, because otherwise the jack doesn't make sense to me.
I'll go with the forbidden knowledge.
Okay. And then your starting equipment is some basic clothing. You can describe however you want, whatever it looks like. One weapon. It can be generally anything because again, what matters is its category. So anything that can be considered a light weapon is fine. A book about the Numenara. 3 ciphers, which I'll hand out ciphers when we're done. 1 oddity, which again we'll go through that at the end. And 4 shins. Shins are coins, essentially like gold pieces or coins.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially. So in this world, basically just little slivers of metal are used as traded, currency.
And then before that, you said there was how many ciphers and
3 ciphers, 1 oddity,
1 oddity.
and 4 coins or shins. So. So your spells are called esoteries. Most people might refer to them as spells or charms or whatever, but you as a nano refer to them as esoteries. They require you to have a free hand to use, and usually cost 1 or more intellect points. If there is no intellect point cost, it functions continuously without needing to be activated, but some will have a duration. You can always end one early anytime you wish. You can choose 2 of the following. Hedge magic, which might work for what you're going for. It costs 1 intellect point. You can perform small tricks, temporary change in color, the color of a basic appearance of a small object, cause small objects to float through the air, clean. It's prestidigitation, right? Mend a broken object, prepare but not create food, and so on. You can use hedge magic to harm another, or you can't use hedge magic to harm another creature or object. It is an action. Onslaught, also 1 intellect point. You attack a foe using energies that assail either their physical form or their mind. In either case, you must be able to see the target. If the attack is physical, you emit a short-range ray of force, inflicts 4 points of damage. If the attack is mental, you focus your mental energy to blast the thought process of another creature within short range. This mind slice only does 2 points, but it's intellect damage instead of might damage, and thus ignores armor. Some creatures without minds, such as automatons, might be immune to the mind slice. Push, essentially force push, right? Scan is 2. Push is 2 intellect points. Scan is 2 intellect points. You scan an area equal to a size of a 10-foot cube, including all objects or creatures within that area. The area must be within short range. Scanning a creature or object always reveals its level, a measure of how powerful or dangerous it is. And you also learn whatever facts the GM feels are pertinent about the matter and energy of that area. For example, you might learn that a wooden box contains a device of metal and synth. You might learn that the glass cylinder is full of poisonous gas, and that its metal stand has an electrical field running through it. It connects to a metal mesh on the floor. You might learn that the creature standing before you is a mammal with a small brain. However, the esotery doesn't tell you what the information means. Thus, in the first example, you don't know what the metal and synth device does. In the second, you don't know if stepping on the floor causes the cylinder to release the gas. And in the third, you might suspect that the creature is not very intelligent. But scans, like looks, can be deceiving. And many materials and energy fields prevent or resist scanning its action. Or ward, you have a shield of energy around you at all times that help deflect attack. You essentially gain +1 armor for free all the time.
And then there's 2 of
You
them.
pick 2. Scan probably would be good because
Yeah.
it kind of gives the idea of your foresight.
Knowing shit.
Yeah. And then Onslaught is a decent sort of default combat ability if you wanted something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think I need to have at least one offensive esoteric.
Probably. It would
So-
generally be a good idea. But you also might get an offensive thing under your focus. If you decide to go that route, we could always return back here and swap it out or something.
For now, I'll take on something.
Okay.
I'm reading this down how to make a secret. It says 3 secrets. 3 secrets. What are our secrets into this? Secrets, tier 1 secrets. I don't know.
They're probably listed in the
Yeah, they're
character options.
yeah
field.
they're listed, but I'm like
I would probably have to hand them out to you, so I have to look at what the secrets are available
Okay.
at tier 1, and I will decide which ones you know. It's sort of like esoteric, or not esoteric, but ciphers and stuff like that. I'll hand that stuff out. At the end.
yeah, this is like muscles of iron, 2 might points. What does that mean? I gain 2 might points, or I
Costs.
It costs
it
two.
costs 2 might points? Oh, okay. To get that secret.
Oh, the secrets are what your abilities are called. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah,
I think
secret
so.
tiers. It says I guess that's what it is
Yeah.
because
So it says you get
it
3
says
of them.
there's a seeker secrets.
Sure.
You have this special abilities related to exploring strange places and utilize called seeker secrets. Some seeker secrets are constant. Okay, I'll just read.
Yeah,
They
those-
actually
those
they
are
explain
your-
them.
Those are
Yeah.
your powers
Okay.
based on your type.
All right,
So
they explain them here, so I'll actually read them because the link I found didn't explain it. So I'm like, okay, I'll just read this. Yeah.
So yeah, just read those. If however many it says you start with at tier 1, you pick that method. Usually 2. It might say you can start with 3, but most types give you 2 at first level. And that's it
Oh,
for now.
yeah, 2. I'm sorry.
That you
2.
You want to stick with right? Okay. We'll go to the right. Okay. So the right. Rights in society. Typically, people are very accepting of you since the things that you craft are often useful and even necessary, whether that means a wagon, a wall, or an installation that can light up a small community. The rights begin to dabble in more esoteric installations, automatons, or vehicles. Public concern can creep in. A right with an automaton servant might be seen by some as a sorcerer who has infused a demonic spirit into crude matter, giving it life like the automatons that litter the landscape and that most people have enough sense to avoid. But a right can be a vital part of any community, especially one that has special needs that can't be met any other way. With enough time and resources, a right can provide clean water, nutrition, defense, and of course, comfortable homes for all to live in. So, again, these are ideas for sort of background to your concepts. You don't have to pick any of these just to give you ideas. None of these work. You have another idea. That's cool. But, so we got unusual upbringing. From an early age, you had access to machines and tools. You're encouraged to learn how to use them. Perhaps you were raised by a nano or an aeon priest who thought building was more important than playing. Maybe your parents were obsessed with the Numenara. Perchance you were incubated and trained by machines who needed human ingenuity and creativity to solve problems. So basically, just from a young age, you've always tinkered. That's one idea. Unexpected brilliance. Your mind developed early, way before your peers, and your parents realized it and delighted in challenging you with puzzles and projects. You could fix household items, and eventually you found your true passion, taking apart oddities, scrap, and depleted ciphers. You figured out how to make broken machines work again, and honed your ability to recognize what a jumble of parts can do if you put them back together in just the right configuration. Most people respected and appreciated your talent. Some tried to exploit you, and a few feared you. But your incredible mind made sure you always came out ahead and gave you enough of a head start to get away from serious trouble. Where did your brilliance spring? So basically, it's like either you started at a young age, or you have just sort of preternatural understanding and knowledge of how things work. Or mechanical indoctrination. The prophecy was clear. If the machine that squatted at the center of town could not be awoken by midnight during the next eclipse, the spear of God would strike like a burning sword from the void and blast everyone and everything to drift. You were one of the ones selected to awaken the Red Cube, and you were schooled, drilled, and cipher-fed. All manner of information, plans, knowledge, and even some physical know-how dripped into your blood by strange machines the city elders kept in dark basements. Others who were selected weakened and eventually died under the brutal regime of learning. It was rough on you too, but where so many others failed, you succeeded, you learned, and with that knowledge, you repaired the machine and saved the city. But in the aftermath, you were different, both physically and physiologically. You weren't taught how to craft things, it was programmed into you, hard-coded into your flesh and mind with drugs and technology, conditioned into your psyche with repetitive drills. You get the gist. So this is more like Catch-20, or not Catch-22, a Clockwork Orange type shit. Again, it doesn't have to be any of those. If you have another idea of where your your character origin comes from.
Yeah, I was gonna play on one of the backgrounds here. About creating a device that causes you to disappear. And you come back, no knowledge where you went, but you have like a strange mark on your body. I thought about doing that, but like as like a kid, having no understanding about how like shit works, and then I just like happened to find some like ancient thing. And it was broken at first, and I started messing around with it, and I eventually found out a way to put it back together, and it came to life. But then like it cost me to go away for a certain amount of time. And then I come back with all this knowledge that I don't know where it came from, and now I know. Oh, I know how to do this, or I have all these ideas that I want to like get out.
Sure.
And,
Okay, I like that idea.
and I'll come back with a strange mark too, because it'll make it more interesting.
Okay. Alright, so your starting stat pools are a might of 9, speed of 7, intellect of 12, and you get 6 additional points to spread amongst those however you want. You got those?
yeah, I got it written outside here.
So where are skills? Are they in the book or?
Again, a skill can be virtually anything that you would know or be capable of being trained or
I
being
mean,
good
is there
at.
a list of them or?
There is a list of examples, but
Okay.
there's no hard, fast.
So,
Set
because
of
like one of the
skills.
things I can do is like, it's one of my secrets is like I can pick 2 skills. So like, what skills?
Anything.
Uh,
If you want your skills to be camping, one, sure. You want one of your skills to be climbing, sure. You want one of your skills
solving
to be,
puzzles.
Yeah, sure. It can be that. It can be biology.
So what?
It could
So
be-
how does that affect my?
It could be muff diving. It doesn't matter.
Does it affect like my checks or anything? Or, like if I
Sure.
was-
So anytime you would
You're specialized.
So-
anytime you would perform something that skill is relevant to,
Right.
you ease the difficulty by 1 if you're trained, or if you're an expert in that particular skill, you ease it by 2.
Okay. So like I'm thinking like puzzles because if I'm out looking, finding things, there could be some. If you're gonna ruin, you may need to solve a puzzle or something, or to do something. Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe it's not. I mean, maybe it's puzzles, or maybe it's not puzzles. It's just that you are adept at pattern recognition, right?
There you go.
Finding patterns.
That's
in
a good
things.
one.
And that's fine.
I'm Rain Man.
There you go. You also can count all the coins in a jar. Exactly,
And
like every time.
and Judge Walker comes on at 7. Okay, what's your Judge Walker?
6 additional points. That's there's no like it's not like it costs this many to up.
No. So yeah, so just
one
you.
point.
Yeah, just you have 6 points to sort of spread amongst those 3 stats however you want to do.
Gotcha.
You have your number.
Eidetic memory.
Yeah, I wrote numbers down plus 6. Just kind of doing some math there. We're going to add it to it. Add the 6 additional to it. Not gonna be a problem.
I mean, if you wanted to be, you could be by dumping 6 into might and then being like, hey, you know, or even like 4 into might and 2 into your intellect or speed or something like that. You know, you could customize your right by default. The right is naturally more predisposed to intellect, but you're not far behind on your might. You could take some of your 6 points to push your might up higher and make it either your highest stat or equal to your intellect or whatever else. So now all of a sudden, you know, you can be a frontline fighter if you wanted, if that's the route you want to go.
Yeah,
You don't. I mean, you certainly don't need to be, but if that's your idea, right, is that you're this, yeah, you're a tinkerer, you're a doctor, you're whatever, but you're used to being in the thick of shit.
yeah, like I might have gone into situations where like it was just me and I don't have any like added
Right.
people around
Or a
me.
combat medic type thing, you know, like
Yeah.
Could be that dwarf dude from Overwatch.
Torbjorn.
Torbjorn, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, don't look and be like, oh well, I'm an intellect based character, I've got to be in the back. You know, don't.
No, I wasn't.
Don't do that.
I was just
Like-
figuring out how to unlock these 6 additionals. That's all. But, okay.
Okay, I got it. Where would I put that?
What are you looking for?
Oops, never mind.
Is it? Have you found anything that?
Oh yeah, lots of things. That's always my problem. I have lots
Yeah.
of things that I want to mess with.
So, I
So,
said,
explain to me on the focuses. When it says a minor effect suggestion and a major effect
Do
suggestion.
you remember when I said if you roll a 19, you can either do
Oh.
3 more damage or have a minor effect?
Oh, okay.
And
And a 20,
on
I'm
a
assuming
20,
is a major.
a major effect or 4 more damage.
Gotcha. Okay. So as you we play, do we gain more abilities or
As you go up, as you get experience, you can spend experience to grab more things.
like how do you determine what you're allowed to buy? I'm assuming it's not in this.
So we're starting at tier 1, right? And their character advancement, there's a number of things that you can spend experience on to increase, like getting another ability from either your focus or your type or whatever of your tier or below. I think increasing your pools is another thing you can expend experience on, and stuff like that. Anyways, there's a list of things you can spend experience to increase. Every time you have increased once you've increased something once, you can't increase it again until you increase tiers. And once you've increased 4 things, you go up a tier. And now you have access to.
I'm assuming things cost different amounts as well.
No.
No. Everything costs the same amount?
Yeah, everything is a flat amount. Everything it's like 4 experience or something like that. Everything.
4 XP to level up according to levels.
Yeah. So every time you want to increase something, it's 4 experience. It doesn't matter if you're tier 1 or tier 5. It's 4 experience to increase something.
Okay.
that's like
16
even out.
experience is a tier.
I decided to even out with mine, so let's put 2 in each of those. 9, 11, 9, 14.
Okay. So your effort is 1, and you have an intellect edge of 1. Your other edges are 0.
Sorry, I put was 1 with the other thing.
Your intellect edge is 1,
Okay.
and your other 2 edges are 0. You can use 3 ciphers at a time, or you can have on your person 3 ciphers at a time.
So, the pool and edge, what is the pool for?
The pool is your total number of points
Okay.
in that thing.
How do you? Okay, where do you get that number from?
It's in your.
You should have a base stat pool according to your type.
Right.
It's in. It's in there.
So, like saying my base is 9, and then I can add up.
you have
You should have
6 more points
to
that you
divide
can.
Right,
amongst those.
So you're saying that would actually be if I added 3 to that, my pool would be 12.
Yes.
So my might's not 12, my pool is 12.
Your might pool is 12. Yes.
Okay.
They're not 2 different things.
Your might will but you need to track your maximum and your current, right? Because you will spend points from your pools. So you need to know what your maximum is,
Okay.
and you need to know whatever your current is throughout the game.
Okay, so that's why it's separate.
Yeah.
So like during the game, I will use out of my pool. So I start with 12 might and 12 pool. If I use something out of my pool goes down to like 10 or something.
Right.
But my might doesn't change because
Your maximum doesn't change.
right, my maximum. Right.
So, all right. So you wrote down you get 3 ciphers. You can use light weapons without penalty, and much like Nate, you have an inability with medium and heavy weapons.
Okay, I rolled to see what my background was, and I like this one. Your greatest discovery to date was stolen by your arch rival.
Your greatest what?
Discovery was stolen by your arch rival.
Okay.
What an asshole.
Yes.
Super.
But then it reminded me of like
Real life.
real life, and I'm like, someone's reverse engineering my fucking code. They don't understand it, but they're gonna reverse engineer it and rewrite it themselves, which means it'll just copy and paste it out of someone
So
else.
basically,
do it.
you're fighting Henry.
What he's going to do is he's going to try to reverse engineer it. He's going to fail. He's going to tell the boss that it's because you're an idiot, and then he's going to spend thousands of dollars to not only replace your software, but to replace the hardware on which it runs, so that he can something he's more familiar with, so that he can pretend to be competent.
Right.
That's what's going to happen.
So you're trained in crafting Numenara, and you're trained in any other crafting skill that you want to pick. So it could be like,
No, wait, whatever. Special abilities.
oh, it should have skills and abilities or something like that. Is one of the things on one of the sheets. I think it's the front sheet.
Yeah, skills and abilities.
Yeah.
Skills and inabilities.
Or skills and inabilities. So you could put like under. You could even do your weapons under that too. You could do like trained, light weapons, inability, medium, heavy, whatever, and then you're crafting Numenara. And then essentially you can pick one of the following that you're also trained in. Salvaging Numenara, understanding Numenara, engineering, woodcrafting, armoring, weaponsmithing, or some other crafting skill that you want to think of.
I made my own homunculus type of thing. And I might have to do like custom.
Under the
Well, I mean,
Skills.
yeah, you could. I mean, you could maybe do crafting automata,
Yeah.
or you could, or armoring. Maybe you could apply to that in some degree, depending on,
under the special abilities, when it says it takes like 2 might points, you'll take that out of your pool, right? To use it, that ability.
you
Okay.
if you have edge in might, though, you would subtract your edge value from that cost.
So it says it costs 2 and you have an edge of 1, you would subtract
1.
2 minus
Right.
1.
Well, like here it says, say, danger sense, 1 speed point. The difficulty of your initiative roll is reduced by 1 step. Enabler. So that means I could, and I have an edge of 1, so it wouldn't cost me anything.
You have a speed edge of 1,
Speed edge of 1, yes.
so then it wouldn't cost you anything.
It would
Okay.
always be in effect.
And then what does that actually do? Does it mean I act faster than
So the
normal?
way initiative works in this is you either go before monsters or you go after monsters.
Yeah.
So when you roll initiative, you're basically rolling to beat the difficulty based on the level of the monster, and then you either go before it or you go after it. So you're lowering the difficulty means you're more likely to go before the monster
Because it lowers it by 3.
because it lowers the difficulty.
Do it by 3. Okay. So that might actually be worth getting.
Are you ready on the next thing? Do you pick your crafting skill?
Yeah, I said crafting on
Automata? Alright.
Automata.
So you also have community builder. While you are present within a community and actively and personally working on behalf of that community, you add 3 to their infrastructure.
I got everything except for the who does what. The thing that you enter, the who does something. You know, you're a something that does something. Who does something? Where is that at? Is that what is that called? Descriptor or
So you're a adjective, noun, verb. So your type is your noun. You
Right.
picked seeker,
So
right?
yeah, type
So do you want
adjective. I have the adjective.
your adjective? Yeah, is your descriptor.
Right.
If you want your
Got that.
verb, that's your focus.
Focus. That's what it was. Focus. Focus. Type. Descriptor.
You have correct? You have
Yeah,
that?
community builder plus
Alright.
infrastructure.
So always tinkering. If you have tools or in any materials at all, and you are carrying fewer ciphers than your limit, you can create a cipher if you have an hour of time to spend. The new cipher is random and always 2 levels lower than normal to a minimum of 1. It's also temperamental and fragile. These are called temperamental ciphers. If you give it to anyone else to use, it falls apart immediately, useless. So essentially it means that you can never be without a cipher, you just can't pass them to other people. As long as you got a little bit of downtime, you can just hobble some shit together and create a random thing that does something. I would just put like always tinkering, you know, if less than max ciphers, spend hour to create.
Or just like a stack a little bit.
Okay.
The stack will stack with tool number and with the additional big box.
So, I don't know that it really matters. I would probably put the total in the small box and keep track of your current in the bigger box just because it's easier.
Basically, probably the big boxes and then it's horrible. And the small ones.
Oh no, so one of them is keep track of your maximum, and the other one's to keep track of your current in any given thing. So you wouldn't put like set 9, 7, 12 in one of those because those don't matter, right? Whatever after you've added your 6, those are the values that matter. So you said it was like what 11, 9, 14. So I would put 11, 9, 14 in both the small and the big right now.
Small and big.
And then in play, whenever you spend from one of those pools, I would subtract from the bigger one simply because it's easier to notice, and the smaller number is just keeping track of what your maximum is for when you're recovering, stuff like that. You know what your maximum is.
That makes sense. That would come back to the other thing.
So yeah, write down that you can make your own ciphers. And then you start with 2 Numenara plans of your choice. I'll let you look through those since it's your choice. It should be towards the back of the Destiny book,
Okay, yeah. Hold on.
and I'll let you look through that once as I'm helping other people. You can
Okay.
pick 2 plans of your choice.
Gotcha.
Keep in mind that plans are rated by level/tier as well, so don't pick anything that's not a level 1 because you wouldn't
Yes,
be able to
I
make
can,
it
yeah, I
anyways.
can't make anything 7th tier.
Right. You start with clothing of whatever the fuck type you want, 1 weapon of whatever type you want. Keep in mind that you're kind of limited to light weapons. An explorer's pack, a book about crafting, 3 ciphers of my choosing. Again, I'm going to hand those out at the end. 1 oddity of my choosing. I'll hand it out at the end. A box of crafting tools.
What is that? Everybody? I'm sorry.
it's just-
I'm sorry.
And 5 shins.
5 shins. He's rich, bitch.
If you decide to pick a ranged weapon that requires ammunition, such as arrows or bullets, you start with 12 of that type of ammunition.
So what kind of ranged weapons are available to us?
Virtually anything you can think of. Again, the classification of the weapon is all that matters: light, medium, or heavy. So
What's equivalent to a crossbow and guns?
A crossbow gun.
A crossbow gun?
a crossbow would be probably a medium weapon.
Yeah. You know, crossbow is a medium weapon, but I'm like, is there a...
Say a hand crossbow would be a light weapon. Right? Heavy crossbow would be a heavy weapon.
Right.
A heavy
So-
hand crossbow would be just a regular crossbow.
Actually, I probably would... I mean,
With a handle for some reason.
does the
Like a
sound
pistol grip.
play into this game at all? Like,
Huh?
if I choose a rifle over a crossbow, would the shooting of a rifle make more noise and trigger more people than
Sure,
a
it
crossbow?
could. Yeah.
I don't know if that. I mean, it doesn't seem to affect us in D&D. If I shoot him with a fireball or if I shoot him with a crossbow, it doesn't seem to. You know.
I don't know if that's true. I think that depends on your DM.
Okay.
Hi, come out to me.
Just that a crossbow is kind of, to me, is more bulky. I wouldn't want to carry that around.
Yeah.
I'm not fucking, you know.
Alright, so you also, since you're into crafting, you start with iotum. So in addition to your starting equipment, you also start with 4 units of IO, which are sort of like the lowest basic units of crafting materials, and 4 units of responsive synth. You also have 6 units of parts. Parts are just
Parts are
generic.
parts.
Parts is parts, yeah. Parts are very generic.
Oh, jeez. Sarah Jean Underwood.
I'd put me there.
Yeah, I would definitely put myself
Who is
there,
that?
too. Sarah Jean Underwood.
Is she a famous?
She's a
She's
model.
a model.
Look,
Underwear
I
model,
know a
naked
little
model.
something about models. Just saying.
So, now we'll pick your. You get. Let's see. You have special attack. Your things are called inspired techniques. Yeah, go for it. Let's see. You get to pick.
Oh! Okay, so why you gotta be so clumsy?
Why you gotta be so
So you get to choose 2 inspired techniques. You can either pick. You can pick an additional Numenara plan, which actually you gain 2 more Numenara plans.
kidding?
And you basically every time you select that, you get to go to the back of the book and grab 2 more Numenara plans. That's cool. Deconstruct costs 3 intellect points.
Okay.
You take the
that's
time to
it,
closely study a bit of scrap machine, cipher, artifact, or other Numenara object structure before attempting to salvage item from it. If the salvage source possesses item that can be salvaged, as determined by the GM, the salvage test gains an asset. In addition, you gain 1 additional item from the salvage attempt, which means 1 additional roll on the item result table. Action to initiate. So basically, it means you're better at scavenging and collecting materials with which to craft from. Extra use is 3 intellect points. You attempt to gain an extra use from an installation or artifact without triggering the depletion roll. Wherever, I don't know. Yeah. Probably. I mean, is there a thing different than the skills?
Skills and abilities, equipment attacks.
And their special abilities?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah, I do special abilities.
Ciphers.
Extra use basically allows you to get additional uses out of magic items before they run out of juice. But it costs you some intellect points to activate.
All these, just pick one.
No, you have to pick 2 out of the ones I'm listing.
Okay.
Natural crafter. All commonplace items or structures you craft are effectively 1 level higher than an average example of that object or structure. For instance, if you craft a defensive wall that would normally be level 4, its effective level is level 5. That is free. It's just a thing that happens. Right tool for the job.
You're a good
Costs
builder.
1 intellect point plus some iotum. If you have at least 1 unit of iotum, you can fashion a temporary device that provides an asset to 1 physical, non-combat task identified ahead of time. For example, if you need to climb a wall, you can create some sort of climbing assistant device. If you need to break out of a cell, you can tune iotum in your possession to serve as a lockpick. If you need to create a small distraction, you can trigger an iotum to make a loud bang and flash and so on. Once fashioned, the adapted iotum lasts for about a minute, or until used for the intended purpose. This use destroys the iotum. Action to prepare the iotum. Action to initiate. So essentially what that does is, since you have an intellect